Actually, no, we never made a decision on what the question was going to be.
You asked the questions. I oftentimes make them up on the spot.
It's okay. Especially since
Just do it!
The original questions you provided were
What a podcast.
They're not going to work, so some of the options we have here.
Here we go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Talking TWAMPs. My name is Jakob Cordes, and I, shock of shocks, will be hosting this week. But before I get to our topic and our question, we're going to go around and introduce everybody.
Okay, the man to Jacob's right. I have to do directionality here. William Moore, and I am a little undecided on what exact one I'm going to do, but I think I was going to do how the government in The Wizard of Oz is depicted, which is interesting to say in the least.
Hi, everybody. I'm Blake Phillips, and I'm going to be featuring a couple of governments on this cast, but I'd like to offer them in context, so I'll wait for the questions to show up.
Fair enough.
Hello, this is a new voice coming to you today. This is Sam Davinia Awad. For directionality's purposes, I'm on the roof, and I'm here along for the ride, baby. I'll tell you about government. All right.
Hello, this is Vincent Tandau. Today we're gonna, my fictional government will be the Ukrainian oh, wait. No, scratch that. I will be doing the God Emperor of Mankind from Warhammer 40K's Imperium of Man.
Okay, and I'm sure, dear listener, you've gleaned by now, either from the title of this episode or from our introductions, that we are going to be talking about fictional governments. But not just any fictional governments. We're talking about the ones that have spoken to us, either because they are compellingly depicted, because they are frankly bizarre, or because they just make sense, and we'd like to live in that world. So let's start with William. William, you brought up The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. So...
now tell us, for those of us who don't know all of the deep Oz lore, what is the government in The Wizard of Oz?
For those of us who don't know that The Wizard of Oz is fictional.
Wait, what?
Exactly. So I'm going to be basing this also off of the original story of The Wizard of Oz that most people know pretty well, and then the story as depicted by Wicked.
Okay, so I was about to ask, are we including the Wicked timeline?
Yeah, only because the Wicked timeline actually includes in the book a surprisingly large amount of geopolitical details about how the country actually functions.
I mean, even the musical, which I assume is a very dumbed down version of the book, includes a great deal of detail that the Wizard of Oz itself does not proffer.
Yeah, so it's interesting in the sense that I wouldn't really want to live here because it really is a monarchy, but it is kind of a monarchy based on skill, if you will, because it is magic users who are ultimately the ones in control of it. Allegedly in the form of the Wizard of Oz himself, even though it is revealed later that he in fact has no magical powers, and he's just, a regular person. But there are other individuals who are in positions of supreme authority who have magical powers in the form of the good witch, the wicked witch to a certain extent, and as depicted in Wicked, her sister. This is where I'm going to bring up the big point, is that her sister becomes the governess of a province in there, and basically has it hereditarily from their father. So there's a lot of hereditary, I guess, inheritance going on in The Wizard of Oz. And there seems to be no clear rule of law because, as depicted in Wicked, they kind of just lock up random citizens kind of as they go throughout the story.
So you're telling me that the Wizard of Oz universe could use a healthy dose of the guillotine?
Yeah, something like that.
So you're telling me you support the Wizard of Oz universe as a viable solution in 2019?
Basically. No, not even remotely. It's just an interesting thing to see that there really is a geopolitical entity in this story that kind of underscores the entire story process. And it's very bizarre because these characters have a lot of authority and are viewed as kind of the voice of the nation quite regularly throughout the story.
I mean, we have to remember, if we're talking about politics in The Wizard of Oz, it was originally written as just an enormous, incredibly boring political satire.
Was it really? I did not know that.
Yeah, right. It was about the gold standard and the silver standard and, William Jennings Bryan and all of that. The part of your American history textbook that your teacher kind of skipped over in the course of one class period.
That's true.
Just like Gilded Age in one go. But yeah, so that was the big one that I wanted to bring up just because it's kind of interesting. An alternative one that probably makes a bit more sense is I'm going to pull from my favorite fictional universe, the Halo series, is the UNSC.
Yes, the space fascists.
Space Junta.
Space Hunter.
Okay,
I don't know.
Vince, I am going to kill you.
But so if you're not familiar with the Halo universe, basically it's set 500 years in the future. Humanity is actively at war with this alien empire called the Covenant that are a bunch of religious zealots. So it's got a caste system and whatnot, but they're not the important part. In the Halo universe, humanity is governed, technically speaking, by what's described as the United Earth government, which is technically an elective government with a parliament and a president. And that is traditionally how the civilian entity operates. But ever since basically the civil war that breaks out in human space due to the insurrection and then the rising covenant, the military basically takes over all parts of the civilian state apparatus. And that to me seems like a reasonable storyline, because in the event of a genocidal mania, like a genocidal alien race is coming to literally wipe out the species, I can imagine humanity would be interested in, probably consolidating all power to fund and fight this war effort as thoroughly as possible.
So not a government we want to live under, but one that's compelling in fiction.
Yes.
I disagree. I think you would want to live under such a government given the threat of annihilation, right?
I
Given the
don't
premises-
personally want to give up all of my freedoms and liberties
But
for
then
a
you
fictional
get
space fascist.
That's because we've never
And
lived
you
under a total
die.
war in our generation.
I would prefer not to be annihilated.
Our ancestors have periodically given up a lot of freedom. I like to think about World War II and the Civil War.
That's true. But even during World War II, at least in the U.S., MacArthur was not president. So
This is true.
That is true.
Okay.
Veering wildly from magical fantasy monarchies to space fascists, let's continue that kind of trend and talk about Vince's government.
Oh boy, you're in for a treat, everyone.
Okay, so Vince, what is this universe, first of all? Because I don't think any but the most nerdy of our listeners knows what Warhammer is.
Yes.
Excuse you. I was a long-term Warhammer player, and you can go, I don't know.
I rest my case.
I was thinking something similar.
Point Jacob.
So to oversimplify, humanity is now a galaxies spanning race, and they are now very, very technologically advanced. But basically, it kind of follows Halo in the sense that we become technologically advanced, we meet other races, and then we decide to dominate them. And then eventually humanity peaked at what is called the golden age of technology, because we basically became the number one species on the entire universe. And then suddenly the AIs we built turn against us, called the Men of Iron. So the stereotypical of this genre, right? And so the world goes into chaos. And there are other factors too, such as when we developed light speed travel in this universe.
Okay, let's
Hold on.
wait.
This is important.
Are we getting to the government?
We gotta get to the
part?
government here. Basically,
I'm
humanity
sold.
peaks and it's in a state of stagnation. Okay.
Not yet, because there are other factors, like when we opened up the warp, it brought about like demons and all that. So what I'm trying to say is we are at a perpetual state of war. And as a result, humanity is now rallying behind this so-called Emperor of Mankind, who is like a psychic. He is a literal god. And so, in a sense, if I could describe it, it would be some sort of theocratic imperialist.
Theocratic feudal monarchy. That's how we're gonna describe it.
Yeah. Do you agree?
It is a feudal monarchy.
I would disagree.
They have regional governors who are hereditary, and they can control their districts as they see fit, so long as they pay the imperial tithe.
In Warhammer?
Yes, in Warhammer.
Okay.
In Warhammer 40k, it's space feudal monarchy.
I mean, I don't know anything about this because, as I've stated before, I'm not a nerd, but
And so humanity goes around defending us from the alien attackers and the demons and all that. And it's not appealing, but it's very bizarre, because I think humanity at this stage really needs a strong leader / God to like help them out. And so I bring this universe up because it is very interesting to see that at the onset of not really annihilation, but
so
like,
we're just going all in on the fascist kind
Yeah.
of imagery.
I'm not just fascist. I'm a theocratic.
Are you telling me that we need
Monarchist.
Jesus? That's all I'm gathering.
Yeah,
we need a God.
we need Jesus, and Jesus needs to kill all the foreigners.
Exactly. Don't build the wall. Build the Jesus.
It
All right.
sounds compelling in universe. I don't think I'd want to live in that universe, though.
Not
Oh
even
no, it's
remotely.
absolutely it's an
it's a-
awful
it-
universe.
it's-
It's constant violence and just terrible. No,
That's even
violence.
described in universe that like it's literally just awful.
yeah,
like
no,
it's,
it's the worst because not only is it constant violence, but no planet is safe because warp technology is clearly abundant.
I think I need to make that more clear. So when humanity, in say in Halo, right, traveling at light speeds or faster than light speeds is not a problem. It's just a piece of tech. Yeah, sometimes it overloads the cores of the Shao-Fujigo engine or whatever, but it's all fine. You get to your planet, just fine. But in this universe, if you want to travel faster than light, you open up this dimension called the warp, through which demons can basically come out and infest your world. So therein lies the problem. Humanity is a spacefaring universe. We span galaxies now, but every time we travel, there's a certain risk of basically getting destroyed within the warp because you need like powerful psychic people in your ship to make sure your ship doesn't explode. And so actually a big part of this universe is that one day when the Imperium of Man is so wide and huge and requires trade from every other planet, the warp becomes unavailable because something else happens that I probably shouldn't get into.
Okay, let's refocus. Okay, Vince.
Crashes.
Let's refocus here on
talk about
governments. Blake, you've been holding your cards close to your chest. I feel like it's because this is going to be controversial. So hit us. What is your fictional government?
Brave New World.
I have a hot take for it too.
Oh, I called it.
Oh,
The Giver.
Oh, is it Brave New World? Are we going to have this
Orwell.
argument again?
yeah,
It's a good argument though.
It's not Orwell.
Wait.
You're right.
Is it The Giver?
I think in 1984, right?
Is it The Giver?
No, it's not The Giver. It's as many people have already said, Brave New World. And yeah, so for people who have not read the book, you absolutely should. But essentially, the way that Brave New World society works is that there is a fixed caste system with fixed population ratios because in utero, which is really in test tube, all embryos are exposed to a certain level of toxic chemicals that determine how intelligent they'll be upon birth. And then they go throughout childhood through a series of psychological conditionings. And by the end, the vast majority, so 99% of them, are perfectly suited to the role that they have to play in society. The 1% that is not tend to be in the highest, the most intelligent caste, and that's simply because they're still able to critically think about what their situation is, and as a result, some of them, mainly psychologists, become somewhat critical of the system. But it is the fictional system that I have found that is the most prone to having the sort of the happiest, most contented population. There are, of course, other elements that others may bring up. There is a heavy drug use that is not. It's not brought upon. The government doesn't require, but heavily suggests that you use these drugs. So it's not like there's just this group of people who are destitute, so they use drugs to like feel better. It's just a commonplace practice. And then there is, and I will exclude this, so if I were to make Brave New World just a little bit more perfect, and I think that the author probably included this because it was helpful for the allegory, not because it was actually part of a consistent government, I'd also get rid of the human reservations that are like big open... Yeah, that are like big open-air zoos, basically. So that is not part of the government that I'm describing as
Idyllic.
So
not idyllic.
Wait a minute, you can't just cut out the things you don't like.
In case our listeners are not familiar with the seminal work of Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, the government that Blake is describing is one where the lowest caste of people basically work in manual jobs every day of their life,
That's not true. They can go golfing. Well, it's space golf, but
Sick.
Of the lowest caste?
yeah,
No, they are
no.
described...
There is a scene in which the main character and her off again, on again love interest. There are two main characters.
and because everybody is
main character
promiscuous
a
in this...
male?
What? So there's the one main character, the psychologist, who's male, but then there's also the secretary that he wants, who's from the B class.
No, who he doesn't want
R-rated
to.
podcast.
Because
that's right,
she
sorry.
wants to...
He'll bleep it.
Oh wait, do you actually bleep the
yeah,
curses?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to, but William makes me.
so-
Gotta go ham on
So
this.
she goes with the propaganda dude who's also somewhat critical of the government to
Because they're the two alphas, right? Who don't fit in, and she's the beta.
yes, exactly. I think that's the scene. Somebody who's listening to this can shoot us an email if you
And
want to
just
correct
to
me.
be clear, this has nothing to do with the incel manosphere alpha beta thing.
Yeah, no.
It's very...
There's the caste systems are described by by alphanumeric letters. But anyway, they go out for leisure and they're space golfing. It's like ultimate frisbee or something. It's really poorly described. But they do that, and then they also see other families from the other castes also doing that.
See, the way I remember it is that he doesn't see anybody from below, I think, whatever the third caste is.
No.
Because it's alpha, beta, and then...
He definitely sees other people, maybe not. The problem is they don't really get into a super detail of describing the lowest of the low castes because they don't really have much story to revolve around them. But the strong implication is that there is entertainment available for all of the castes.
Yeah, I just don't... from a moral standpoint...
Oh, of course, no. Morally, this is abhorrent. I couldn't stand by any of this, but...
But this is your ideal government.
I didn't say ideal. I did not say ideal.
None of us thus far have brought up an
Yeah.
ideal
Blake
government.
Phillips for president.
Interesting, consistent, and high happiness rates, which I think is an interesting way. If your goal was to produce a government whose sole purpose was to make sure that almost everybody in society was content with their role in life, this would be a pretty decent one.
If you want a
true.
spacefaring, galactic spanning humanity,
Constant war.
constant war.
Ripping the universe apart, you got
Yes.
it.
No, I mean, Blake has a good point,
Vote
though,
for me.
that this is one of the few examples of a dystopia in the very strict sense, which is, it appears to be a utopia, but there's something wrong with it. People are actually happy, and it's still not a perfect government.
Right.
Although,
So, no,
interestingly,
yeah.
and this is usually the moralistic argument that's brought about it, it's very difficult to argue in favor of any of the rights that we protect here if everybody is content. It's usually all the rights that we defend are a way to voice discontent with your state in life. But if everybody's content, it's very difficult to argue against this particular form of organizing society because it's so moralistically based in the morals that you hold that you
Right.
don't like it for some
Well,
reason.
I think the only argument you can make, you can't really argue, right? You can't argue from freedom of speech because, I mean, they can speak freely. They just have to go to the island, whatever they talk about in Brave New World.
Yeah,
even-
basically the regular people reservation.
Yeah.
Well, most people can speak freely. They just choose not
Yeah.
to.
But I think what you get down to is the argument you can make against it is the human dignity one, where it's
That is
you know,
that is the one that, of course,
that old human dignity argument. It really gets you
Always
every
gets in the way of
time.
ideal government.
that human dignity argument is inarguably the key linchpin that means that is why I do not perceive it as the ideal government. That there is a certain amount of autonomy that you lose, which is basically all of it, when you are pre-programmed to fulfill the role that you fulfill. But otherwise, if a lot of governments, their whole thrust is you're going to enjoy life more after I cut taxes, after I implement a social welfare program, after I increase the military size. But this government has created a by and large contented society, and so in being sort of broadly contented, it's also a nice criticism to understand that maybe governments ought to have a different, or at least a secondary goal that is also preserving human dignity.
Okay, so from that very serious and philosophical argument, let's hear from our final contributor, Sam.
Guest speaker extraordinary. I got an ideal government for you.
Oh, boy.
All right.
This is not look.
When you're looking for ideal fictional governments, look no further than PP, and that's not what you think it is. Princess Peach. All right.
Oh,
No. Let me tell you about this. Let me make my case here. Look, monarchy, right? Worked before. Had a good time with it on our real Earth.
did we?
Look.
Wait a minute.
Don't question my statements until I'm finished. Look, in any government, you're going to have some dissenters, and some of them, and obviously the monarch leaves herself open, to some
kidnapping.
snatching occasionally.
Except for I don't really see Bowser as a dissenter, right? It's just a warring between two kingdoms because
exactly.
Bowser
Look,
also has domain over a certain population.
Thriving ecosystem in the kingdom.
And a series of castles, no less.
Series of fortresses. Greatest military on Earth. Undefeated.
Who, Bowser or
Mario.
Peach? Oh.
Mario.
Oh,
She just sends out one guy and you're good. You got all the toads.
Well, I mean,
everyone's
he is-
eating. You
he
see how many
is
mushrooms
immortal.
are just laying around? Everyone's having a great time.
It's clearly a libertarian paradise. Drugs are freely available.
True.
Well, not
this free
freely
world? They're-
available. You do have to purchase them.
You have to purchase or find them.
Look,
that's true.
knock 'em out of
Thriving
block.
market system. You
No,
get
unfortunately,
a nice
it is
range of
suffering from
prices.
runaway inflation in the form of these massive gold coins. So
That's fair. That is a very
The money
strong
does
point.
literally grow on bushes, so...
it's like,
Are we?
that is a
Are
slight
we gonna
issue.
consider the Mario Odyssey world too?
You see, I was thinking about
Where,
that.
like, because that does have a better case, because there is like New Donk City, which clearly has an elected
Exactly.
mayor. So
Exactly.
Well,
and a thriving.
It has a
marketing economy.
mayor.
It has a
We're
mayor.
actually... I don't know if there's anywhere in the
The
game that it
elections
mentions
were not-
that an election has taken place.
this is true, but everybody seems to like her.
They
so at
dance.
least
There's parties on rooftops.
She's a musician,
she is.
Yeah, but there's also rampant crime in the city. I mean, you can openly beat cars with no police interference
This is
at
true.
all.
You can also take random cars
Yeah.
for your own. You literally possess them, but that's a different problem.
That strikes me as somewhat of a political machine corrupt society.
The US
Especially
and the Gilded
since, and I
Age.
can't back this up, but I'm pretty sure that at one point the mayor and Mario were dating. And
It's
Oh,
true.
that's
Isn't it
true.
Mayor Pauline?
because
who was
Yes.
the ori-
from Donkey Kong.
who was the original Donkey Kong heroine?
This is true.
I mean,
Okay, so let's scratch New Donk City. Just scratch
No, I thought
out.
that still made the good connection. Well, everybody seems to be happy, at least in the Mario universe, for the most part, other than Peach, because she's constantly getting kidnapped and
But then she
kind of
she
having
was
Bowser
safarying
kids, except
after
not.
she gets
yeah,
kidnapped. You know,
is
she
she
was on
really
vacation.
unhappy? Like,
Well, she was about to get in, because in Super Mario Odyssey, she was about to get forced to get married, which is a step up from the normal. I'm not really sure what
Yeah,
Bowser's
the fact
out
that the
for.
government didn't really come in and stop that actually is a pretty glaring problem with whatever's going on in the Mario Odyssey universe.
And not to
Although,
mention,
honestly, great diplomatic move on behalf of the two, if it were consensual,
Yes.
because it's the unification of the two kingdoms. So,
It's essentially just William and Mary.
but it is also worth pointing out that on every planet except for Bowser's kingdom, there seems to be an oppressed Goomba minority that is, just
That's
imprisoned
fair.
in boxes.
Literally stepped on.
or-
I think what we're missing here is there's a perfectly functional government. Mario isn't a part of it. He's a rogue element. He's a war criminal.
But he's clearly been hired by at least one of the governments.
now listen, the
So
CIA,
paramilitary.
the CIA
Hey, Rogue
gives
Toad
weapons.
tells him that he should go.
Yeah. Listen,
sorry,
like
but
the
our princess is
CIA
in the
gives
castle.
weapons to the Contras, Princess Peach sends Mario to do her dirty work.
Right, but that's still a part of the
that's
government
paramilitary.
system. I think it's a
Works.
valid criticism that we have a monarch that'd be willing to engage in such terroristic acts.
Maybe Peach and Bowser have been trying to get Mario killed under the table this entire time. They're like, yeah, go! Save me.
He's an eldritch being. He dies so many times and he keeps coming back.
Well,
they
you have
can't
to understand
stop
that
him.
Mario probably represents ultimately what Peach and Bowser fear. They're monarchs. He's the working man. So, you got to keep him. You got to give him a consistent
He's dressed
action.
in
Is
red.
Mario communist?
You exactly. So you make. Well, he wears red, so he's clearly. So
Got the red hat.
leans a
Every
lot.
time he gets to the end of a level, what does he do? He brings down the flag
Oh,
of the end
oh,
of the
there
kingdom,
we
the
go.
symbol of the
There we
government.
go.
That's it. You got it, Jacob. You got it.
That's it right there.
So what they do, what the monarchs have clearly cleverly done, is vilified one of the monarchs and made the other one a heroine, and so to keep the working man occupied, they have sent him on these mindless quests.
He's the only working man in all of the kingdom.
That's true.
That's true. Everyone
Imagine if
else
there were
has
more
Although a
their
bunch
time.
of the toads run shops, so
Oh, I guess that's
They're the petty bourgeois. They sell to Mario.
Yeah,
it's
but
true.
to
And
be
you'll
fair-
notice that it's a total military-industrial complex. Because all the things that they sell are just things that help him in combat. So
Oh, that's fair. They are also like the free houses where they're just like, solve this easy puzzle and you'll get
Listen,
my stuff. You know, they're just giving that away to Mario.
The toads are arms dealers, or worse, like Explorer Toad with Captain Toad.
Captain Toad.
I mean,
Explorer Toad.
he's invading indigenous areas.
Clearly
Yeah.
colonialist.
Colonialist.
Yeah.
I take it all back.
absolutely.
This is the worst government ever.
Yeah.
You know what's a similar government is the government in The Legend of Zelda,
I knew it. That was
right? Because they had a king,
same situation, man.
and then
Well, it is a monarchy. Like
yeah,
that.
so
we
there
just,
was
like,
a king.
I
Zelda's
don't
literally
know.
a god.
The whole government isn't a monarchy, though. Doesn't Gerudo Town have?
That is true, but they appear to be more in like kind of client states of Hyrule than anything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Looking
like
more
the
of a
imperial,
Greco-Roman
Hyrule itself is like the imperial center, and then you have like the client states that
Yes.
are the exterior, that are technically in treaties of alliance, but
yeah, the
like,
ones that are
really.
outside the city walls.
I don't know. It seemed less like client states than just. I guess client state could be accurate. The only issue is that the ties binding them often are only conflict really is able to bring them together.
That is true.
You know, maybe it's something like the Delian League.
Yeah,
you know,
like a long-standing alliance structure like NATO.
Yeah.
With the Hylian Kingdom being clearly the supreme member.
It's the
more-
United
You're
States
telling-
in this.
the
You're
US of
telling me
NATO.
they have a NATO in The Legend of Zelda.
Well, yeah, it's the organization basically to defend, instead of against the Russian bear, against the giant fiery pig.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Airtight.
But listen,
and
I
I mean
think-
that explains a lot, though. Like in which Legend of Zelda was it, where it's actually Ganondorf, where he's king of the Gerudo? It completely throws everything into disarray because an alliance member now is acting directly against the entrance of the alliance.
Yeah, I mean it's Donald Trump. It's a
Wait,
complex...
I thought Donald Trump was the Hylian king.
Oh, it's
Hey,
even
don't
if you think
speak
about
so
it,
poorly
even,
of Ganon.
it even gets worse if you
Yeah,
consider
no.
Breath of the Wild, because the Hylian Kingdom is the only one that has technical command over the super weapons,
Yes.
and it loans them out to the different races.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Now, if we're comparing this to the Mario world, clearly it's still a more benevolent monarchy. You know, they're not abusing their citizens' rights. There's clearly an extant working class.
I will
you know?
admit that I have not played a ton of Legend of Zelda games, but it seems less like a benevolent monarchy and a purely incompetent one. I mean, almost all of our exposure to them is either that they are underwater, or that they are in complete collapse because their government has once again been sacked by the same ancient evil power that returns every
Although
time.
I
now
have
wait,
to
but
admit,
remember-
I think that there's some indication that yes, in the games themselves, it's always a period of crisis, right?
That's what I was going to say.
But-
We only show up when there's a problem.
Because
Yeah,
there's no
because,
story
like-
without a crisis.
Yeah,
That's
because like in
true.
the opening of the latest Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, we had this whole thing where there's a 10,000 year period of peace between the crisis and this current one. The fact that a monarchy was able to maintain stability for 10,000 years without a significant crisis is pretty impressive, especially if it's the same bloodline. Because it has to be, at least according to the games, because it has to be the bloodline of the goddess.
And they were also preparing for the next Ganon attack with the Guardians, right? It just so happens.
Well, I think
that-
those already existed.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah. What I'm
no,
saying
they're-
is they weren't just falling for the
Complacent.
same hole over and over.
It wasn't
again.
a
They decided
stagnancy
to.
thing.
No, they actually
decided
did.
to
That was the whole.
buttress their defenses.
No, that was the whole point. Is that they forgot about how to use them appropriately, so that when he came back the second
'Cause,
time,
I mean,
he
Breath of
possessed
the Wild
them.
is interesting because it's not post-apocalyptic, because there's no apocalypse. It's just civilization just kind of slid a little.
Well, it's
you
what
know?
happens when you have the dominant power suddenly collapse. You know, it's kind of, you can look at it as kind of the disintegration of the USSR. The Central Soviet Authority just collapses and the states go and do their own thing suddenly. And that's what kind of happens to the alliance there, is that Hyrule collapses as a functional geopolitical entity. And so the aligned member states just kind of do their own
whatever
thing.
they
Solid analogy right there. I'm tearing up.
So Legend of Zelda, as long as you don't have the misfortune
Of being
to
born.
live in the time when Link is there,
Yes.
There are vast periods where
Yes.
it's just a chill place to live. It's just fun. You
Oh,
know?
it's also
Hyrule. You know?
Yeah, it's also very
a
safe.
relatively multicultural society, given the fact that there are literally dozens of different races, like just kind of doing their own thing.
And if you were a
together.
merchant, you could just walk with all your goodies
Yeah,
with you.
no
one person.
mugs
Just
you.
walk around. Nobody gets mugged. Nobody does anything bad.
But they say it like about the Mongol Empire, right? A man could walk from, Japan all the way to Europe without having to worry about getting robbed.
Be difficult to walk the first part of that journey crossing the ocean.
Okay, Korea, so China, what have you. So,
Except, and I will point this out, they did not solve the climate change issue. I mean, they were underwater for a long period of
You
time.
see,
well, it was just literally divine intervention that caused some of those problems.
Yeah, that was the Jesus is coming back, and that's why the ice caps are melting of the Hyrule universe.
It's a solid point.
Wait, what was the government in the Wind Waker? In the water
Wind
world.
Waker?
Yeah,
There really wasn't
There was not
one.
one.
It's
It was
just
just
island
autonomous,
kingdoms, right?
autonomous.
It worked
towns.
pretty well.
Yeah.
Again, until Link showed up and screwed
Yeah,
everything.
Well,
No.
he made the world come back to normal and then reestablished a monarchy, which probably wouldn't go well if you think about it. Having a bunch of independent little city-states being like, listen, y'all are now under a monarchy and you've lost all
I mean,
independence.
it worked
We can't
decently.
really enforce it.
It worked decently well in Italy for like 50 years.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But that
10,000
required
years
an
of peace?
extremely
Or 50?
powerful, military force to enforce that order. So
I mean, they are divinely empowered. I think they get.
this is true.
I think that may be the real reason that their monarchy is so stable. That there was the whole divine right of kings in our world, right? But like they've got pretty striking evidence that there's a divine right.
Yeah, Zelda could just snap her fingers and display some magic.
fireball or
Yeah,
whatever.
fireball.
Incinerate
one of
whoever her
they have-
daughters are.
They have a near monopoly on
Wrong
magic.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, like at the last scene in Breath of the Wild, Zelda basically does the equivalent of detonating a tactical nuke, like in the middle
Yes.
of Hyrule Field.
She got the Moab for 25 kills.
Exactly. He's like, and it's like, oh, and you're gone now. Sorry about that.
So it seems like all of these fictional governments revolve around, well, most of them revolve around some sort of deity.
Well, they seem to also revolve around an extremely high centralization of power, right?
Because of said deity.
Because of said deity, but also it just makes a better story, right?
Well, I
can you
think-
imagine trying to do the Legend of Zelda, but it's a parliament, so it's like, okay, we got to get the leader of the Greens in behind this one.
Well,
too.
I think what we're coming
The
down.
Labor Party's not backing us.
No,
on
we got to go with the
this
conservatives.
Brexit
It's like-
deal.
The Rito are protesting outside the parliament.
yeah, the Rito
my
are protesting and the
God.
Gerudo are conducting Grexit, so it's like, oh god,
Grexit.
It's like,
I mean, I think
Just
the
sounds like a-
conclusion we're kind of reaching towards is like, you can have a monarchy and it's cool, but only if you're literally magic, because otherwise it's the worst
I mean,
form of
I
government.
would like to point out that Brave New World is an exception to both of our assertions.
That's fair. That's
well,
fair.
it's got like a small clique of people in the form of the world controllers who actually dominate the world.
Well,
it's
I
more-
mean,
if
they
anything,
do
it's more like an
plan and
oligarchy,
institute
right?
new
Yeah.
plans,
Yeah.
but in
And listen,
in
sufficiently advanced science is fundamentally
Pretty
indistinguishable
magic.
from magic.
Yeah, it's like what Thor said.
I would
Thor
like to point
too,
out
right?
that it was advanced for the time that he was writing the book, but most of the science.
Oh,
that
what,
they,
the hypnotism? The sleep things? That's not a little,
Or the
There's-
toxic chemicals.
There are
that
psychological
determine
theories
birth.
that you can do sleep suggestion.
oh yeah, sure,
The
Freud.
chemicals we can absolutely do.
Well, I mean, that's just drugs.
Yeah.
No, I was referring to
literally fetal
the litmus
alcohol
test for babies.
syndrome on a,
Yeah, no, we can do that.
the litmus test for babies.
They don't litmus test babies. They put in a certain amount of chemicals so that they know that they will be a certain intelligence.
This has been
level.
like a clearly this is an
yeah.
industrialized
I thought it was a
process.
diagnostic.
No,
a
they're not
diagnosis
testing.
of the-
No. They are changing.
yeah,
Yeah,
which
no,
is
like,
where the
they
human
spend
dignity thing
they
comes
spend
in.
the first whole chapter like discussing in detail
Yeah.
the process of making humans in this. Yeah, and, like they spend quite a while going
It's
through
all
the
test
whole
tube
process.
babies.
Test tube
it's
babies,
all-
they make them in specifically numbered batches. They are all genetically from either the A or the B caste, so that they start intelligent and
So
then they
sex
can
is
work
not
their
for
way down.
reproduction purposes.
No,
No,
not
not at
in
all.
the slices. No.
Well, because everybody, they
everyone gets
make it
free
pretty clear
condoms,
that
right?
everybody is completely on some form of birth control.
Everybody is incredibly promiscuous.
All of the
Either
women,
that or there's-
all of the women are on birth
Yeah.
control.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. They're all on birth control. They have like just massive drug-induced orgies all the time. Like that's a scene in the book. Like they don't show you anything, but it's like it
They don't
occurs.
show you anything in
Yeah,
the
or they-
non-picture book.
A gallery.
It's a flip book. It's like- very quickly. But they do describe other situations. Like there was it's like a saxophone concert or something like that. Yeah. Like that was like a thing that they attended. The saxophone. Like it's a jazz concert, but sex.
That's amazing. Why don't we do that here?
How would they make this? I'm not gonna ask that.
This one's called Sex in E minor. D minor, I guess would be the more appropriate.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I thought you were going a total different approach.
Yeah, I heard sex and I heard minor. I'm like,
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
I was like, whoa,
no. Hold up, Sam.
Definitely D major.
Okay.
Major D.
There you go. We got there.
Sex and major D, everyone.
I have a pretty ideal fictional government, but it's pretty far out there.
Lay it on us.
A UK that isn't getting fucked by Theresa May.
Got him.
No, they need a healthy dose of the guillotine over in the UK.
Nigel Farage should be among the...
If May's deal gets struck on a fifth time, the alternative is guillotine.
Oh, they are up for a fourth one.
They are, I know.
Yeah, didn't they just vote it down,
They
though?
did.
Yeah.
So
She's slowly sleep on it. I know he projected it 3 times.
What she's doing is she's shaving down the deal until it gets viable, which is hilarious.
Okay.
I will proffer one government then that is not even. So if we're gonna say the world designers are in some way a sort of oligarchic centralized government,
okay,
I will proffer a non-centralized government that I actually think I would live in. And it's the one from the book that I'm reading right now, which is called Anthem. I don't know if you guys are at all familiar with it.
Anthem by Ayn Rand.
No.
Anthem, published by EA. No.
But as a brief summary, basically there are 2 governments. There's the exterior government, which is free to change like our governments do. Basically, it's up to the whims of the people. They want a democracy. It has some strong man instituted a fascist dictatorship. Who knows? But then there's also a cloistered system of basically intellectuals whose whole job is basically with religious fervor to study and archive scientific knowledge. And so they have a sort of pact with the whatever secular government exists outside of their walls, because they're all in these walled-in cloisters, to not attack and kill them, but they will provide at any call by any secular power information and technology. So
there's basically a technocratic bubble in the middle of this larger government.
Right. And so the way that it's worked in the book is that there have been waves of extreme richness outside of the walls of these cloisters, skyscrapers, just huge metal structures, and then the society will collapse. There will be a feudal monarchy for a couple centuries, and then they'll rebuild.
Just every once in a while, just got to go through that.
And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of years of these different imperial, Roman-esque sort of governments, all sorts of different governmental structures, and they just keep moving inside of their little technocratic bubble. There have been a couple of sacks, but by and large, they're just secure in their bubble. Which I think is a really interesting way of organizing a society that, look, you guys can do whatever you want on the exterior. In here, we're just going to make information and keep it safe.
Well, that's to a certain extent rather similar, if you think about it, to ancient societies that had, a caste of priesthood or whatever. I'm thinking more along the lines of, ancient Greece or something.
And the
where,
scholars,
the actual governments operate differently, but nobody directly influences, the actual...
Even monasteries in early Christianity.
So I think the more apt analogy is almost certainly the monasteries during the Dark Ages, because the at least the priesthood governments, as I understood them, the priesthood caste in Greece had a certain amount of control on the government if they were to consult the oracle or something like that. But it's explicitly and legally encoded in these cloisters that they are not to interfere with the government unless asked to provide just information. And I, in that way, I think it is much closer to sort of the monastic orders in the mid-Dark Ages that were just, they collected books, they kept them, and they copied them, and that was it.
Okay. So, I don't know. I don't know if we're really going to have a final question. We seem to have, exhausted our things. Actually, no. We do have a final question. We're going to start with Vince. Worst government to live under.
Worst?
Absolutely worst government to live under.
The ones that we've discussed.
Fictional governments. Any fictional government.
It'll have to be Warhammer 40,000.
Once posed as Vince's ideal government.
Man. We live for... Well, the good news is humanity has survived for 40,000 years. So that's
But
pretty
how?
good. But human dignity, freedom of speech, we
Not
survived.
dying.
We survived, though.
Randomly, yeah.
But, well,
Okay.
I would not want to live under that because,
I guess I'll say Animal Farm because I'm a human, so I'd just be murdered immediately. Yeah, I don't actually, upon saying that, I don't really want to delve into the finer points of Animal Farm's government. So why don't you go, Blake?
It's a communist analogy.
Yeah,
Soviets.
I'm definitely pro-communism, but it's just the animals killing me.
Not as good.
I don't know. I guess I'm stuck between 1984.
Damn it! I
Fine, you can have that one.
No,
then,
go
'cause-
ahead. You do it. You can...
And Lord of the Flies. That would have been the other one. Just
Lord of the
'cause-
Flies. That really count as a government, though. They're
Yeah,
children.
yeah.
Okay.
There's
It's
a
a larger
system,
analogy.
as long as you're
Yeah.
holding a particular shell and then have enough moral
Was his name
authority.
Porky or Piggy or what's the name of that guy?
Yeah, Piggy. Yes.
Piggy.
Simon.
Simon and Piggy.
Simon is the one with epilepsy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So 1984 was going to be mine because it's just a state of perpetual warfare and everything sucks.
Well, mine wasn't even the issue with the warfare. It's just that as an average citizen, I wouldn't know what's going on because
That's part of the reason. You're
there are
being
hints in-
constantly disinformed. You're in a war economy. That means you can't have anything.
we got lots of war. In
It's
this
actually
Warhammer
consistently
40K war
hinted in
as well.
1984 that the war may be fake.
That is true.
Yeah,
But
true.
it doesn't matter if the war is fake. You're in a war economy. Just there's no war.
It's barely a war economy. It's just a
They literally don't have anything. Everything in production either goes to misinformation or in military industries.
they claim they don't actually talk about what he produces beyond just sort of
Yeah, that's true. 'cause He works
Propaganda.
in censorship.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
But
from
you
his
never-
point of
yeah.
view, he's in a war economy.
Well, that's my point. My
My-
biggest problem would be not knowing literally anything as fact.
That's fair.
I'm guessing they would do that, though, for every citizen, except for maybe the ruling elite, is that they think and either know or are in a perpetual war economy, which means you can't have anything. Civil liberties just don't exist, and you're also completely uninformed. I guess my follow-up, though, would be, because we brought that up already, would be the universe or the government as depicted in the Hunger Games. Mostly because
Tough one.
it's
Tough one.
just...
Oh, I forgot.
It's
about
just
that.
like, okay,
Yeah.
like the capital, they say, like, lives in, just absolute wealth or something. But the government and just the societal organization is freaking stupid. It's a completely inefficient way to organize an economy. Because you have these districts, right, that only produce one thing. Heaven forbid we just have a bad crop because the entire nation starves because this one place was the only one that produced food.
Now there are 3 districts that produce
One
food.
produces fish, one produces grain, and I don't remember where the other one is.
Animals, maybe?
I think so. I think
There
it's
was an
husbandry.
animal husbandry one.
Okay, the point is that you wipe out though a huge amount
Yeah,
of your
listen,
food
mad
production.
cow disease gets into that district and you're done.
Heaven forbid,
No more meat.
District 13 gets annihilated, and suddenly the nation or not 13, 12, it gets annihilated. As happens in the book, the nation now no longer has a supply of coal, which has made it clear how they produce energy. So
Well,
it's like
I don't know. They also have hydroelectric dams.
Okay,
and
they do have a
nuclear facilities.
not anymore, because remember they nuked District 13. It's
Yeah,
that
but
they
the
didn't.
capital had its own nuclear facilities.
Well,
Anyway, so the point is, yes, that seems like an interesting, because not only is the government dystopic, but they're not very good at it either.
they're not even good at
Wait,
extracting resources.
honorable mention: Wall-E's government from the Disney movie.
well, I
Wall-E.
don't know if it's
That's
that
pretty
bad.
ideal. It's pretty happy.
Yeah, but for the
Really,
human
it's a
dignity
robot that
standpoint-
takes over control, and there's literally no
But I
way.
mean,
There's
like,
the robot.
Yeah, you just get to be fat and happy.
It's kind of the Brave New World. It's kind of a Brave New World thing where, like, it's not an ideal government,
Yeah,
but at least you're not.
there's
at least you're not unhappy.
with knowledge, like, always kind of comes some sort of unhappiness. I think that's like the big split. Is that if you don't know anything, you're pretty happy.
That's a good point.
So basically, you want to be the genius ruler on an island of Cretans.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Honorable mention to Handmaid's
I could
Tale
deal with
too,
being a
which would
Cretan.
also be pretty terrible especially for women. just gonna
Handmaid's
say,
Tale, that's
yeah.
true. Although that's not the only government in that world.
That's fair. America still exists.
Mexico.
Yeah. What's the name of the place in
Harry Potter
starts with,
universe.
like a D or something?
Oh, guys, Man in the High Castle.
Well, that's
Yeah.
just
Well,
just Nazis. Nazis is bad.
Nazis suck, like, obviously.
Nazis bad. Confirmed.
We got it. All right.
We got him! Okay, and of course I will put in my final word, which is actually, the interesting one I would have brought up if we had had time would have been the New California Republic from Fallout New Vegas. And the worst one to live under? Caesar's Legion. Also
in
from
New
Fallout
Vegas.
New Vegas.
It is true. It is trash. Literally,
That's
everyone's
nice.
a slave.
I like that.
So our discussion ran a little long, but I think there were interesting points brought up. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more at the podcasting network at William and Mary on Google Play or iTunes, wherever you find your podcasts. And we really appreciate you guys listening. See you next time.